Over the past 2 centuries, America has risen dramatically from its humble roots as an isolationist nation to the dominant global superpower it is today. Serving as a beacon of democracy, capitalism and hope, the United States has reshaped the entire world order and contributed more to global, technological and social progress than any contemporary nation. Given the outsized impact our nation has had on every facet of modern life, it's difficult to imagine a contemporary world order without America at the helm. However, with the rise of competing economic superpowers, disturbing decline of democracy worldwide and our own internal strife, we now find ourselves at a tipping point, where the U.S. faces the first real threat to its superpower status since the end of the Cold War. While it's not too late to fight the threat that China, Russia and their allies pose to our geopolitical standing, our leaders must immediately take drastic steps if they hope to retain American economic and military dominance over the next century. In order to understand how to correct course, it's important to first trace the roots of our current problems. After decades of trailing Great Britain and other European powers, America first secured its position as the leader of the free world, after providing the military might necessary to propel the Allied powers to victory in World War II. The period immediately following the war proved critical to establishing America's superpower status, with the Bretton Woods system making the dollar the world's de facto reserve currency and the Marshall Plan extending American economic and military influence across Western Europe. Since then, the dollar's position as a reserve currency and the unprecedented global peace enabled by our military, after the Cold War, have helped both the American and worldwide economy to thrive in a free market system and globalized world order. America still enjoys the effects of our enviable position, which allows us to influence worldwide economic and social policies. However, the past 2 decades have seen our national interests undermined by costly, prolonged wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, increasing wealth inequality and the collapse of our manufacturing sector, all of which have contributed to national polarization and legislative stagnation. Internationally, China has capitalized on its enormous blue-collar workforce to propel its economy, in the process taking away many middle-class factory jobs in America. Using their new influx of capital, China has made billions in strategic investments across Asia and Africa, positioning itself in control of the markets projected to have the highest growth in the coming decades. After severing Russia from our economic system by banning them from SWIFT, revoking their most favored nation trade status and scaling back the presence of American banks, Russia has now found a haven with China, which now powers the Russian economy. America's growing debt is the result of simple math. Each year, there is a mismatch between spending and revenues. When the federal government spends more than it takes in, we have to borrow money to cover that annual deficit. And each year's deficit adds to our growing national debt. Historically, our largest deficits were caused by increased spending around national emergencies like major wars or the Great Depression. Today, our deficits are caused mainly by predictable structural factors: our aging baby boom generation, rising healthcare costs, and a tax system that does not bring in enough money to pay for what the government has promised its citizens. If the debt crisis roiling Washington were eventually to send the United States crashing into recession, its economy would hardly sink alone. The repercussions of a first-ever default on the federal debt would quickly reverberate around the world. If the debt crisis roiling Washington were eventually to send the United States crashing into recession, America's economy would hardly sink alone. Also known as the debt limit, this is a law that limits the total amount of money the government can borrow to pay its bills. This includes paying for federal employees, the military, Social Security and Medicare, as well as interest on the national debt and tax refunds. Every so often US Congress votes to raise or suspend the ceiling so it can borrow more. The cap currently stands at roughly $31.4 trillion, £25.2 trillion. That limit was breached in January, but the Treasury Department used extraordinary measures to provide the government with more cash while it figured out what to do. The repercussions of a first-ever default on the federal debt would quickly reverberate around the world. Orders for Chinese factories that sell electronics to the United States could dry up. Swiss investors who own U.S. treasuries would suffer losses. Sri Lankan companies could no longer deploy dollars as an alternative to their own dodgy currency.